Alrighty, so let's start. So this is, you said that hocam, fine, so we're going to answer these questions using economic models. But, you know, like these are simplified versions of real life, so there are some assumptions, you know, like in these models. Fine, but you said that as every scientist, we have to check the validity of these models, okay? So how to check? Check the validity, okay, of our models. How would you check? What would you do? So suppose you have a model, the model has some assumptions, and the model would say some stuff, right? At the end. So how would you check the validity?
Observe the real world.
So of course, you know, like you're going to, in order to test, right? So you would like to know how well this model explains the real world, right? So there could be two ways. There could be two ways. One way is actually what they call the direct approach, okay? So what is the direct approach? You can actually test the assumptions. You might go to real life data, you might go to real world, you might go to real life, and see whether those assumptions are actually valid or not, okay? So this is what we mean by you can actually test the assumptions, okay? But sometimes you can also do this. So there is this guy called Milton Friedman. He's a Nobel laureate. So actually he says that the assumptions are unrealistic simplifications anyways, okay? So it's nonsense to test the assumptions, because if you go ahead and say that, oh, all individuals are the same, let's take it to real world. Do you think this is going to survive in our test? It's going to fail immediately, right? So, but what he says is actually, he says that what is important is actually implications, okay? What your model implies, you should go ahead and check. So with those assumptions, you have your model and it has some implications. So go ahead and check those implications, okay? Instead of testing the assumptions, go ahead and test those implications, okay? So that's what they call the indirect approach. Okay, so indirect approach means that you're going to test the implications. Okay, so this is basically, so like, you know, but if you would like to, so this is, you know, you can do it in two ways. So for instance, let's see an example. So in this course, you guys told me that, hocam, firms would like to do what? You told me something. You said that, hocam, firms would like to, what did you say? Would like to maximize profits, right? Actually, that is an assumption, kind of an assumption as well. It kind of states that the only goal of firms is to maximize profits, okay? So let's see, for instance, example. Let's say that, suppose we have this model, economic model, okay, of profit maximizing firm. So let's say model of a profit maximizing firm. Actually, it would be better if we, but we'll come to that later, okay? So this is actually a price taker firm. It's better to say it, but I'll say it later, okay? So for instance, when you look at the model where firms are profit maximizers, there is this implicit assumption that, you know, that probably you never thought about it, but the only goal of firm is to maximize profits. Do you think the only goal of the firm is to maximize profits?
No.
No? What could be some other goals?
To
to penetrate into different markets or to fight the competition.
Right? So like your friend is talking about, they might want to, like get some reputation, build some reputation, right? They might want to, enter a new market, so they might behave accordingly. So, but if you're going to see, like not in this course, but later on, you're going to see that when firms look at dynamically, it would mean that they don't want to maximize their current profits, but they would like to maximize their future profits as well, okay? So but yes, of course, I mean, they might not be, so there could be some cases, like such as gaining reputation. So if you assume that the only goal of firm to maximize profits and current profits, let's say, okay? So this kind of ignores, let's say we said that gaining reputation, okay? Or they might be obtaining prestige, obtaining power, whatever, okay? Power, etc. But as I said that you can still, you see immediately you change some sort of the environment if you can think of this profit maximizing thing as a dynamic like problem, then these would mean that you would like to gain reputation because in the end, you want to maximize your profits, right, in the future. So still you can put it, you see, even though you assume, but you can easily, change your model to account for these facts. Or there is something called, have you ever heard something like a principal agent problem? So like it's sometimes called agency, so ignores gaining reputation, ignores agency problems. So principal, this is actually principal agent problem. Have you heard anything like this? It's okay if you haven't, but have you heard? You have? Yeah.
For example, there's a 12,
Uh-huh.
there are some managers.
Uh-huh.
Managers know more information than the stakeholders.
Yes, so the shareholders, right? So exactly. So this is within a firm context, but in general, principal agent problem, exactly. So this is, for instance, or let's consider it within the firm context. So as your friend was suggesting, there is the manager, right? And there's also the owners of the firm, right? The shareholders. So do you think their interests, they always coincide, they're always aligned? So for instance, as a manager, suppose you're the manager, okay? Do you want to, and you have lots of business trips. Do you want to fly business class or you want to fly coach, economy class, as a manager?
I want to fly with
Jet, okay, so, right, you want to fly business class. So this is because what you would like to do as the manager, right, you would like to maximize your well-being, your happiness, what we call your utility, right? But is it good from the point of view of the stockholders, right? Or like the owners of the firm, the owner of the firm. The owner of the firm would like you to take coach, right? To fly economy class. Or suppose you have some, you're going to go on a business dinner, right? So as the manager, you would like to go to a really nice, fancy restaurant. Or, to, I don't know, like a crappy one, I don't know, Burger King, I don't know, McDonald's, whatever, right? So the owner might not be Burger King, maybe, then you might not get any clients, right? So they might want you to go to a mediocre, okay restaurant. But because you're going to eat, you might want to go to a better one, right? So you see that there could be some cases where the principal's interests and the agent's interests, right? The managers and the owner's interests are not aligned, right? So it could be the case that the principals, the owners of the firm, they want the firm to maximize profit, right? But the agent, which is the manager, might not, his priority might not be maximizing the profits of the firm, but it could be, right, maximizing his own utility. He might want to fly business class, he might want to go on expensive, business dinners and such. Or even suppose, for instance, there is a case and your friend was suggesting that in many cases, the manager might have more information than the owners, right? Than the shareholders, okay? Because it's the manager who knows what's really going on in the firm. So the manager has some informational advantages, right? So suppose, for instance, let's say the firm is not doing very well and what is best for the firm is to shut down. Do you think manager would say this? If you were the manager, if the firm shuts down, what's going to happen? You won't have a job, right? So it's you see that even in those cases, the principal, actually the agent, might not be revealing, right? It's not the firm shutting down might be the best thing for the firm, but it might not be the best for the manager, right? So sometimes what we call, there could be conflicts of interest. And this is due to, and also there are some informational issues as we talked about. So you see that the simple firm that we're going to consider is not going to have these problems, okay? But is this realistic? No, we know that there could be these problems, okay? So you'll see that as you take more and more courses, you're going to drop those assumptions that, oh, there are no agency problems, okay? You're going to drop those assumptions and then you would see, oh, what if there's an agency problem? Let's see what's going on, okay? So this is actually what you would do. But basically, so even when you have a simple model of a profit maximizing firm, there is also this assumption that the only goal of the firm is maximizing profits. That might not be true, okay? So this is this is the case, all right? So we said that we can check these assumptions. So how to check? Suppose we have this model of a profit maximizing firm and you want to check this, like test the assumption, which is only goal of the firm is to maximize profits. How would you check this assumption? What do you think they did in order to check? Okay, they gave out some questionnaires, right, to the executives, to the, managers of the firms. But, I mean, of course, you ask them, is your goal is to maximize profit? You're just, you only think about your firm. You don't think much about yourself and your well-being. And most of them said that the goal of the firm is to maximize profits. But some of them stated they didn't say that, oh, I want to be happy. I want to, get the most out of it, like with nice trips, business trips and nice business dinners. But they actually stated some other objectives as well, okay? But you see that this testing assumptions, though Milton Friedman is not one of my favorite guys, but he was, as I said, he was a Nobel laureate and he was a good economist. So what he was saying is actually kind of right? So like testing the assumptions, they're unrealistic anyways, and it might not be that, logical to do it, right? So it's you can try to test, but how are you going to test this, right? Instead, he said that let's have that model with those assumptions and let's see what that model says and let's go to data and check that, okay? Remember, what did we learn about the profit maximizing firm? For instance, do you remember for your friends, do you remember firm would actually operate if the price was this? In the short run, obviously, right? So if this is average variable cost, okay, we will learn what this is. But basically, it's actually, suppose the firm needs to spend some, it has a cost of all these, what we call the variable inputs, right? Suppose they have to pay their workers, they have to, pay some operating costs, okay? But suppose they don't have, they've already paid the rent. Let's think of Mozart Cafe downstairs, okay? Suppose they've already paid the rent to Bilkent, okay? And then, but every month they have to pay some money to their workers. They have to buy some, right? To make salads like tomatoes, lettuce, and such, right? Some ingredients, raw materials, you can call them, okay? And etc. Okay? So suppose, and this is average, and suppose variable cost is the cost of them. Average variable cost is actually cost of them divided by quantity. Okay, we're all going to see this. But basically, so this is the average variable cost. It means that on average, one salad is costing how much in terms of variable costs, okay? So if the money that you get per salad is less than, you know, like what that salad is actually costing you on average, would you keep on operating? So for your friends who have taken econ class, right? So this is what the, you know, like model of a profit maximizing firm would suggest. This is an implication of the model. It says that if price is less than average variable cost, firm should actually shut down, okay? So you can actually test this. You can actually look at data. You can check their costs. You can check whatever the price in the market. And then you can actually check whether firms are actually shutting down when price is less than average variable cost, right? So this is an implication of that model. And this you can take to data and test, okay? So you see, it's very important, even though this is going to be a theory course, it's very important, you know, like to take these implications or assumptions to data and to check, okay, their validity. So that's why what we say the empirical analysis is also very important. So if your model cannot explain anything about real world, if your model cannot be applied to real life data, actually that's not a good model, okay? So as I said that even this course is a theory course, it's very important, always keep in your mind, and then you're going to see in you're going to take, you know, like econometrics and also some other applied or empirical courses which are dealing with some applied work and empirical work, okay? It's very important to take these models, whatever we learn here, to data, because that's what we would like to explain, right? We want to explain what's happening in the real world. I can write a model which has nothing to do with how people behave in real world, right? Then it's not going to be useful, okay? So don't forget that it's very important that we test these models, and we test them, and in order to do that, we use empirical analysis, okay? That's why, for instance, I am an applied micro sort of person, okay? So I have all these theories, I have my models, and then I take them to data and I see what's happening, okay? Whether these models are good, they can explain what I see in real data, what I see in real world. And if they cannot, then you go back and you check, okay, maybe my assumptions are too unrealistic, right? Maybe I should change my assumptions, or I should change some other stuff about the model, okay? So that's why it's actually very important, okay? So don't forget that empirical analysis is very important, okay? Even though this is a theory course, always keep in mind that unrealistic theories, they're not useful, okay? So you should always keep in mind what's happening in the real world, okay? And that's how we would test, right? Our model would tell us something, we're going to go to data and test, okay? So we're going to use some statistical methods. You're going to do this in your econometrics course. You're going to use some statistical methods to test actually either the implications or the assumptions of these models, okay? So basically, so this is that being said, that it's actually very important and very crucial, okay, to have useful models. If you look at, so every economic model, as you see, would have different assumptions, right? In one case, you might say that, you know, like all agents are the same because you are actually, all individuals are the same. You might be interested in some other stuff. But in some cases, it's important that individuals are different, right? Then you might want to incorporate that. So every model might have a different set of you know, like assumptions, but usually we have some common stuff in our, you know, like in economic models, okay? So one of them is actually, so we can call them like some sort of common features of economic models. So one of them is actually what we call, mostly, as I said, that we know this, most of you probably know this as ceteris paribus, but it's apparently the correct Latin pronunciation is ceteris paribus, but most of the people would say it ceteris paribus, and if you say ceteris paribus, they would look at you probably, in a weird way. But anyways, but there is this, like ceteris paribus or ceteris paribus assumption. Okay, in most of the economic models, you would see this. So basically, what it says is, so let's actually write this. So let's say common. Let's call features of economic models. Okay? So probably this is going to be the lecture that I talk the most, and from now on it will mostly be math, but this is the part where we write most of the stuff on the board in terms of words, okay? So like, as I said, that the first one is actually the ceteris paribus assumption, okay? So what does that mean? It actually means that, some of your friends said that, it means holding everything else constant, okay? That's what it's like ceteris paribus basically mean. So let's actually say this, all other things being the same, okay? Or all other things held constant, okay? So why do we need this? Suppose you would like to know what's happening, let's say the market for cotton t-shirts, okay? So suppose, let's say, like you want to know what's, like you want to understand the market for cotton t-shirts, okay? So just regular t-shirts, okay? So suppose in your model, so for instance, you would like to explain, let's say, cotton t-shirts. So you would like to explain, like this market and the factors that you would like to include. Let's say it could be, right, wages of textile workers, right? It would be right, so wages of textile workers, let's say, okay? What else would affect the market for cotton t-shirts? Wages of textile workers, what else? Weather, right? Because he's saying that, weather will affect cotton, right? So, and they're going to use like cotton threads to actually have those cotton t-shirts. So we can actually say cotton prices, okay? So he was going to the very, basic factors, which is true. Definitely, you can say weather, okay, conditions. And what else, for instance? These are kind of what side? This is kind of which side? Do you think this is our side or the producer side? Producers, right? So like the wages, cotton prices. So let's say we would like to understand their market. So what else? We also have a say in the, right, cotton t-shirts market as well. By what? No, but us, right? Or by our demand, right? Maybe I like linen t-shirts, right? I don't like cotton t-shirts. You know what linen is, right? Ketan. Okay. So, right, so maybe I like, I don't like. So also there's this consumer side, right? Whenever it's the market, always keep in mind that they're the buyers and the sellers, right? So there is also their demand. So basically, so our demand would be affected by our incomes or whatever, okay? You can say consumer incomes. Suppose you have a model, you say that cotton t-shirts, and I would like to explain this market, and these are the factors that I would like to include, okay? So what is missing here? So, or you can actually say, for instance, like what affects cotton t-shirt price? There are lots of other factors, right? So what else, for instance? So for instance, no, we're not there yet. So for instance, wages of textile workers, but if you produce them in a factory, what else would affect? Machinery or electricity, energy prices, right? For instance, let's say energy prices, right? I said that, for instance, some other, like, do you think the price of, for instance, linen t-shirts would affect cotton t-shirt market, right? it would, because it's your friend was now substitution stuff, like now we can incorporate, right? So you can actually say prices of linen t-shirts, okay? And some other stuff, right? It might be the case that, but whenever you build your model, you actually say that, okay, I'm going to incorporate these factors, but what I'm saying is that I'm not saying that, these factors are not important, but I'm saying ceteris paribus, ceteris paribus. I'm holding these guys constant, okay? I hold all these other factors constant, and I want to know, for instance, when wages of textile workers change, how would price of cotton t-shirts change, okay? Holding everything else constant, okay? So this is basically how we mean by ceteris paribus or ceteris paribus assumption, that in the models you would see that there would be some stuff which are not even mentioned, okay? So if these things are not mentioned, it doesn't mean that energy prices are, are not important. It means that, let's say that these guys stay the same, but I would like to know when these guys all stay the same, but these guys change, what's going to happen, okay? So this is what we do. If we were, like other scientists, if we could have a lab, right? If we can tell, okay, play this game again, right? So let's say consumers' preferences are different. So let's say let's call it consumers' tastes. Okay? Suppose suddenly everyone started liking linen t-shirts, okay? So it's going to be actually, it will definitely affect, right, our results. But when you have your model, you actually think that, okay, these guys stay the same. I would like to look at the effect of these guys, what's going on here, okay? So as I said, that if we could have a lab and if we could, one by one change all the factors, right? Like others most of the other scientists, right? We could control stuff. That would be, that would have been really nice, but with human beings or, like with these kind of stuff, it's very hard. I cannot tell, like all the cotton producers and the consumers, now change your tastes. Now play the game again. Let's see what price would look like, right? That's not going to happen. So we cannot do this in a lab. So that's why what we do is we try to use some statistical methods in order to keep these guys constant and then see what's going to happen, when I change this, what's going to happen to the price of a cotton t-shirt, okay? So this you would actually see. We have to rely on statistical methods because we cannot have a control group and an experiment group, right? So this is very, for us, it's actually a bit hard, okay? So that's why we have to rely on, as I said, that some statistical methods, and in models we cannot account for all the factors. We're going to pick the ones that we think are essential or what's important to us, and we say that, we're holding everything else constant, okay? But suppose I said this, but let's say in the data, there's a huge change in energy prices, right? And of course, I test my model, it failed. So apparently, I should have maybe also include that this guy is also changing as well, okay? So that's why you should always, sometimes you read articles, sometimes you see models, they state that, this affects, but they take it to data, it doesn't explain data very well. Then at the back of your mind, you should say that, there are stuff that these guys don't say, and I believe that it's because of the energy prices, because there's this huge change in energy prices, okay? So operating the factory is very costly during that period. That's why that is the case, okay? But this is typical, so you would see that they're not going to include every single factor there, but they will actually include some factors which are essential, which they think important, and whenever they do the analysis, it means that holding everything else constant, okay? But, so because we are going to use mathematical tools, basically we're going to call these factors variables, okay? So this is actually one thing that I hope you, at the end of this course, you will learn. So my 101 students know about this, okay? So the factors that we are in math, we call them variables, okay? So how do you pronounce this word? Variables, okay? It's not variables, so it's variables, okay? So it's good, it's, you know, like there are, whenever I actually listen to people, whether they have good English or not, I check two words. One of them is this, variable, okay? And the other one is this. Read this. Determine. Determine, okay? It's not determine, no. It's not variable, no, okay? So just, I mean, hopefully, you know, like, so you will just pronounce them properly. So we're going to use the word variable a lot in this course. Variables are going to be those factors, okay? And because we're going to use mathematical models, this is going to be, so we would have different variables, okay? So we're going to have what we call exogenous. So exogenous variables and endogenous variables, okay? So exogenous variables, okay, exogenous variables are variables you would see, they would be, you know, coming outside the model. They would be variables that are not determined within the model, okay? So these are kind of, you know, like, but endogenous variables would be the variables which are determined within the model, okay? So for instance, what do I mean? Suppose I have an economic model, okay? So let me say, suppose our model is, let's say, the profit maximizing firm, okay? Or let's say, so let's say for firms, we have a model of profit maximizing firm, and also the firm is a price taker, okay? So it could be a firm, you know, a price taker, it could be a perfectly competitive firm or whatever, but just think of that, it's a profit maximizing firm and he's a price taker. That is our model, okay? That's one of the assumptions. Now, if the firm is a price taker, it means that it doesn't decide, right, on its price. So what is an exogenous variable in that case?
Price.
Right? Prices of the good, and also it could be if he is a price taker both in input markets, you know, let's say it's the textile firm producing cotton t-shirts, then they're a price taker in when they buy cotton or cotton thread, right? And they're also a price taker, you know, when they set their own price as well, okay? So basically then you said that, for instance, in this case, we would have, so this is, let's say, the example. So for instance, here, price of output and input, okay? So price of t-shirts and price of, for instance, cotton would be exogenous to the model, okay? So let's actually write this. Prices of inputs and outputs, okay? Prices. But what do firm decide on? You'll see that if the firm is a price taker, but they still get to decide on something, what is it? Suppose you're a firm, right? How much will I sell? That I can decide, right? Cost is also, you'll see that it will be dependent on quantity, how much you produce, you'll see. But you see that, so basically prices of inputs, for instance, wages, they take as given, okay? Or the, so, you know, like the prices of the machinery, whatever they take as given, okay? And for instance, so this is actually the case, and we said that exogenous variables are, so these are determined outside the model. There would be models where when we drop the price taker assumption, so it would be determined within the model, okay? So prices could also be determined within the model, okay? But here, for the simple case, that's what we said. So exogenous variables like prices of inputs and outputs, right? Those are kind of inputs to our model, okay? And then endogenous variable, as you said that, oh hocam, firm will decide on how much to produce, right? How many cotton t-shirts that they're going to produce. So this is going to be the endogenous variable, right? So let's say output produced, inputs hired. You'll see that when we go over firm theory, this is what they will decide on. How much to produce, and how many, let's say, workers to hire, right? How many machinery, how many computers they should buy, okay? They should be using. They're going to decide on those stuff. So they would be so these will be determined within the model, but if they're price takers, they just take them as given. Okay, so this is basically, so here we said determined within the model, okay? The model. So this is what we mean by exogenous variable and endogenous variable, okay? Whenever you're going to solve for that variable in that model, it would be the endogenous variable, okay? So whatever you take as given would be given to you, those would be the exogenous variables, okay? So you see, these are all the factors that we were basically talking about. Now, or if you actually would like to think of it from a consumer point of view, as consumers, what do? So for instance, whenever we decide on, let's say, how many movies I would like to go, what do I take as given? Can I change the movie prices? No, right? I take the movie price as given, right? Prices of the good as given, but I decide on what? Day, time, or how many movies, right, in a month, let's say, I will go. That I decide, right? That's the endogenous variable. But the price of the movie, that's actually an exogenous variable. When do you think I can actually affect the price of the movie? I cannot, obviously, but for instance, let's say you are, I don't know, let's say you produce tomatoes, okay? And suppose you're Walmart. You know what Walmart is? Have you heard that there's this big, huge store in US? Actually, that, so if I'm Walmart, if I'm buying tomatoes, do you think I might have an effect on the price of tomatoes? Or even though I'm the buyer? Right? Why?
Because you buy in bulk.
Yeah, right. Because if I'm a big buyer, right? So if I actually, then I might be able to affect even the price of the, right? Like as the buyer, I might, if I'm the only buyer, let's say, of, suppose you produce some goods at Walmart, they sell everything. Let's say they sell board markers, right? I might even affect, like the price. As by myself. But when we are thinking mostly of, as I said, the perfectly competitive market, or like these tiny small firms, then of course, as Ayşe Hoca has absolutely no effect on movie prices, right? So that's basically it. Okay, so just keep this in your mind. So this is one thing that we would see these, like caterers paribus assumption sort of style in all economic models. And then what else we have? We remember I said it in the very beginning, we have some sort of an optimization behavior, okay? So as Ayşe Hoca, I would like to maximize what we call my well-being, what we call my utility, okay? Or you guys would like to maximize your utility. Firms would like to actually, maximize, as you said, their profits, right? Even your grandma, now she's going to be the, like the star of this course, you'll see. So it's, at some point I ask, what's the name of your grandma? And yeah, so it's, but you'll see. But like even she also would like to, like as any individual, would like to maximize her own utility, right? Or we said that governments would like to actually maximize public welfare, social welfare, benevolent governments. And actually, or, firms would like to minimize their costs. Okay, so you see that there's always this optimization behavior, right? I would like to maximize something and I would like to minimize something, these agents. And sometimes it can be an unconstrained maximization or minimization. Sometimes it could be a constrained maximization or minimization, right? So this is basically the case. So it's actually but your grandma, so optimization, right, means that what do you do when you would like to maximize a function, even though it's a constrained maximization, whatever, what do you do? You take derivative. Do you think your grandma knows any derivatives? No? Then how can we explain her behavior, or she's maximizing utility? How do we say that? My grandma didn't know. She passed away, but she didn't know any derivatives either. Right?
At some point, there is no change in the additional decision.
Additional? No, but we say that, how they behave, how they decide. For instance, your grandma, she's buying what? I don't know, She buys what? She goes to the, farmer's market, right? She buys vegetables, whatever, right? So how does she decide how much vegetables to buy? We said that we have a model which explains this, which says that, she's going to get some utility, happiness by consuming those vegetables. So she would like to maximize her happiness by consuming those vegetables, but she's constrained, right? She doesn't only have to buy vegetables, but she has to buy some other stuff, right? She needs to give you some money, right? Some pocket money or whatever, and she needs to pay rent. But apparently we represent her behavior, using a model which says she's maximizing her utility subject to some budget constraint. How does she do it? How are you doing it before you knew any calculus?
By maximizing maybe quality price ratio,
your grandma.
She tried to choose more quality stuff and less price.
No, but he's right. So and you were going to say something similar stuff. Okay. So here's what I think it's also in your book. I kind of like this. Here's what they say, and I think it's kind of logical. Think of a professional pool player. You know what pool player is? Bilardo oyuncusu. So think of a professional pool player. So what was his name? We had the Turkish guy, Semih Saygıner, right? So okay, good. So it's so suppose he hits the ball, right? And he hits it perfectly that it hits some place and then hits the other ball and then it goes through the hole, right? So do you think and if we would like to explain how that ball moves, we have to know pretty good physics, right? The law of motion, it's going to hit the resistance, whatever the wind, right? And it's going to hit the side and then maybe all sorts of, right? So the resistance of the ground, like that cloth, whatever, all these requires lots of calculations, right? And you have to know the series laws of physics, gravity, whatever, and all these kind of. Do you think whenever Semih Saygıner, whenever he hits the ball, he's actually computing all of these in his mind? No, right? So it's just as your grandma. So, but he hits the ball in the right way, right, in the best way, and then actually he manages, he hits it in some way that it's as if he's actually maximizing, right? Or he's actually doing it in the best way, right? He's not calculating it. He's not taking derivatives. He's not incorporating law of motions or laws of physics. But his behavior is like that. And it can be explained using those, laws of motion and all these, sort of pretty technical stuff, okay? So just keep in mind that, so keep in mind that even though we would see some sort of optimization behavior, okay? So even though we're going to see some derivatives and such, don't think that, okay, my grandma doesn't use them. Yes, your grandma might not be using them, but these optimizing behavior is the one that explains best how your grandma behaves, okay? So we'll continue, but we have, again, this is the second feature, okay? We have some optimization assumptions, okay? And we'll write the third one on Friday.